For 20 years, she had kept one broken photograph inside an old wooden box beneath her bed. The photograph was faded and torn straight through the middle. One half showed her standing beside her family on a warm summer afternoon, but the other half was missing. Every time she looked at it, she felt the same strange ache in her heart. Someone was missing. Someone important. But she could never remember who. She had asked her parents many times when she was young, "Who was supposed to be here?" Her mother would become silent. Her father would simply say, "Some things are better left in the past." But those words never gave her peace. The photograph had been taken when she was 17. She remembered the warm sunlight, the old garden, and her mother smiling beside her. She remembered her father standing behind them. But there was an empty space where someone should have been. As the years passed, the mystery became part of her life. She married. She had children. She built a home of her own. Yet whenever she opened that wooden box, the same question returned. Who was missing? Late at night, she sometimes held the photograph in her hands and whispered, "God, if there is something I need to know, please show me." But heaven seemed silent. Years later, both of her parents passed away. While cleaning her mother's belongings, she found the same photograph wrapped carefully in an old handkerchief. She was surprised. Her mother had protected the broken picture all those years. Why? She sat on the bedroom floor, holding it against her chest. Tears slowly rolled down her face. "Mom, what were you hiding from me?" There was no answer, only the quiet sound of the clock ticking on the wall. She placed the photograph back inside the box. She thought the mystery would remain buried forever. She was wrong. 20 years after the photograph had been taken, her youngest daughter decided to clean the attic. "Mom, there are so many old boxes up here." She climbed the stairs and began helping her. Most of the boxes contained old clothes, books, and family belongings. Then her daughter noticed something behind a wooden beam. "Mom, look at this!" It was a small metal box. Her mother immediately recognized it. It had belonged to her mother. Her hands began trembling. She searched through an old drawer and found a tiny key. When the box opened, she discovered several letters. The first letter changed everything. The letter was written by her mother. It described something she had never known. There had been another child, a baby boy, her brother. She stared at the words, unable to breathe. Her mother explained that the baby had become seriously ill shortly after birth. He had been taken to another hospital for treatment. Then something went terribly wrong. The hospital records became confused. The baby was registered under the wrong surname. Her parents were eventually told that their child had died, but they never saw his body. Her mother had never believed the story. She had continued searching. The next letter revealed that her mother had spent years trying to find the child. She had contacted hospitals. She had spoken to doctors. She had searched through records, but every road seemed to end in silence. Then, years later, an elderly hospital worker contacted her. The child had not died. He had been transferred to another facility. Another family had taken him in. The truth was finally beginning to appear. She looked at the broken photograph. Suddenly, The empty space made sense. The missing person was her brother, the brother she had never known existed. She continued reading. Her mother had written one final letter. I kept this photograph because one day my children may need to know that our family was once bigger than the picture shows. She covered her mouth. Her heart broke. All those years, she had thought the photograph was simply damaged. It wasn't. Her mother had deliberately kept it as a reminder of a child who had never been forgotten. She fell to the floor and cried, "God, where is he?" For the first time in 20 years, her prayer felt different. She wasn't asking for an explanation anymore. She was asking for a person. She began searching. Old records, church documents, hospital archives, family papers, anything that might lead her to her brother. Weeks passed. Then, one afternoon, she found a name. Her heart began pounding. The man with that name lived only a few hours away. She stared at the phone for several minutes. What if she was wrong? What if he rejected her? What if he knew the truth, but didn't want a family? Finally, she dialed the number. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then a man answered. "Hello?" Her voice trembled. "I'm sorry. This may sound strange, but I believe we might be family." There was silence. Then the man asked, "What was your mother's name?" She told him. The silence became even deeper. Finally, he whispered, "I have been looking for her too." Tears filled her eyes. She couldn't speak. Neither could he. For a moment, 20 years disappeared. She wasn't a grown woman anymore. She was 17 again, standing beside her family in an old photograph. Only now she knew who had been missing. Her brother, the little boy everyone had believed was gone. They agreed to meet at a quiet church 3 days later. She arrived early. Her hands were cold. She kept looking toward the entrance. Then the door opened. A man walked inside. Their eyes met. Neither moved. She had never seen him before. Yet, something inside her heart felt strangely familiar. He slowly approached her. "Are you?" She nodded through tears. They embraced. It was the hug they had both been waiting for, without knowing exactly what they were waiting for. He whispered, "I thought my family had forgotten me." She held him tightly. "No," she said, "you were never forgotten." They sat together and talked for hours. He told her about his childhood. He told her about the family who had raised him. He told her about the questions he had carried throughout his life. "Why didn't they come for me?" She lowered her eyes. "They did." He looked at her. "They searched for you." His eyes filled with tears. "Then why did God let it take so long?" She had no answer. Neither did he. But sometimes silence is not the absence of God. Sometimes it is simply the part of the story we cannot understand yet. Suddenly, the man reached into his jacket. "I have something." He pulled out an old photograph. She froze. It was the missing half. Her hands began shaking. For 20 years, she had carried one half of a broken family photograph. He had unknowingly carried the other half. They placed the 2 pieces together. The picture became whole. She began crying. He laughed through his tears. "So, this is where I belong." She nodded. "Yes." Then she whispered, "God brought us back." That evening, they stayed at the church after everyone had left. The building was quiet. Soft evening light came through the windows. They sat together and prayed. They didn't ask God why it had taken 20 years. They didn't ask why the family had suffered. They simply thanked him. "Thank you for bringing him home," she whispered. Her brother bowed his head. "And thank you for letting me know I was never forgotten." For the first time, both of them felt peace, not because every question had been answered, but because the most important answer had finally arrived. They had found each other. Before leaving, she carefully placed the two pieces of the photograph together. The torn edges matched perfectly. For 20 years, she had believed the broken photograph represented everything her family had lost. Now she understood something different. The photograph had never been the end of the story. It had been a clue, a tiny reminder that someone was missing. Someone God had not forgotten. She looked at her brother and smiled. "Let's take another picture." He laughed. "Why?" "Because this time," she said, "we'll make sure everyone is there." They stood together outside the church, beneath the evening sky. The camera captured them smiling through tears. She looked at the new photograph and felt something inside her finally become whole. 20 years of questions, 20 years of silence, 20 years of wondering, and now an answer. She realized that God had not ignored her prayers. He had been working in places she could not see. Sometimes, God doesn't reveal the missing piece when we want it. Sometimes, He waits until the right moment, until hearts are ready, until circumstances come together, until what was lost can finally be restored. She placed the old broken photograph beside the new one. The old photograph reminded her of what had been missing. The new photograph reminded her of what God had restored. She smiled through her tears. For 20 years, she had kept a broken photograph. She never knew that one day, God would use it to lead her home to the person who had been missing all along.